The reason why I started this whole thing, which was very introspective but not just, is because unfortunately terrorism came into my life. On the 19th of August 2003, I lost my husband, who was working for the UN, in the big blast that hit the UN headquarters in Baghdad. And with him, 21 colleagues died, including the Special Representative of the Secretary General, and more than 100 people were injured, friends and colleagues. So that day I lost the man of my life, I lost the father of my child, but more than anything else, I realized in retrospect, that day threw me very violently in a place that I didn't know. In the last 14 years, I obviously had to deal with grief, with my private suffering, but I increasingly realized that this is hitting, as you know, because you read the news and you're listening to the radio, so many of us around the world. So at a certain point I felt that time had come for not just reflect on my story, and it's not just for the sake of telling my story, but to make this story public and reach it with research and notions and references that others have developed, to try to take the reader through the perspective of the victim. What happens concretely when terrorism hits you? You can find victims of terrorism right now in every single continent of this planet. And unfortunately, terrorism is here to stay for a while, so I think getting to know concretely what we're going through is important.
What victims of terrorism need is somewhat similar to what victims of other crimes and other atrocities need as well. They need implementation of the rights that they already have, and that's one thing that we see across the world, across Europe. So this is one of the big problems, that the rights that are there are not implemented in practice. And then the other thing that we see, particularly for victims of terrorism, there's a lot of talk around terrorism. It's a big theme, it's in the news a lot. But in the response to terrorism, the focus is always on the perpetrator and not on the people who suffer the consequences. And it's only after terrorism strikes that the governments become active and that they then institute special programs for compensation of rights. And that's one of the things that we believe is important for the UN to step into that gap and develop a notion of victims of terrorism and a body of rights for victims of terrorism.